Welcome to my channel Starlight Sci-Fi Stories. Thanks for watching. Please like and subscribe. The station drifted in silence. Its lights flickered unevenly, like a heartbeat struggling against decay. Most humans had long since written it off, logging it as dead and worthless. Mara knew better. Space rarely stayed truly quiet. She had learned that every abandoned outpost, every silent hub, could hide a story waiting to be awakened. Her ship's scanners pinged intermittently as she floated through the service ring, magnetic boots clicking against rusted metal. She had been scavenging stations for years, chasing supplies and tech remnants left behind by corporations and forgotten colonies. Today, she was expecting nothing more than old machinery and dust. And yet there was a sound. Not an alarm, not a groan of metal settling, but something fragile, something breathing. Her ears twitched under the hood of her helmet. The sound was uneven, small, human-shaped. Her brain decided before she even processed it. Mara paused, letting the echo of her boots fade. She followed the noise past a collapsed bulkhead, through gravity pockets that wavered like liquid, debris floating around her. There, curled against a wall in the cold shadow of the station, was a girl. Pale skin, large eyes that reflected the dim lights like glass, and ears that stretched elegantly back along her skull, tapering into points no human had. The girl's chest rose and fell weakly. Mara's heart clenched. She had seen suffering before, but this was on the edge of nothing. She knelt, careful not to startle her, and activated a handheld scanner. Her vitals hovered at critical levels, faint signals fluttering like dying stars. Mara checked her own supplies. One food ration remained, a compressed nutrient block, dry and tasteless, meant more to fill the belly than to comfort. She hesitated. She had been counting that ration for herself. But the girl's gaze, large and imploring, left no room for argument. With trembling hands, Mara broke the seal, letting the paste cool on a patch of metal. The girl leaned forward cautiously, then took a small bite. Relief spread across her face like sunlight through mist. Mara exhaled quietly, a tension she didn't know she held leaving her shoulders. "You're humanish," Mara said softly, testing the waters. The girl made a sound, something between a question and static, learning to form language. Mara shook her head. "Don't worry, I'm not going to hurt you." Somewhere deep in the station, systems long dead whirred to life. Lights brightened slightly. Air purifiers vented carefully, as if the station itself had been waiting for this moment. Mara laughed softly, nerves escaping as humor. One tiny act of mercy had shifted the balance of everything. The girl's body, weak at first, began to respond. Her vitals steadied, her movements gaining strength. By the time Mara helped her to her feet, she was more than a fragile child. She was a survivor. They moved toward Mara's ship together. The vessel's AI protested, locking doors and flashing warnings about the unregistered life form aboard. Mara ignored it. "She's coming," she said simply. Once inside, the girl explored everything with quiet awe, fingers brushing over panels, absorbing the hum of life from the ship systems. Mara watched her, nodding the rapidity with which she learned. The ship adjusted to her presence automatically, seats molding to her form, lights responding to her gaze. When Mara finally ran a scan, she found something impossible. The girl's recovery was not just fast, it was accelerating. Injuries knitting, cells regenerating at speeds no medical model could explain. Mara's jaw tightened. "That's not right." The girl tilted her head, eyes wide, curious. She tried to mimic Mara's laugh when Mara exhaled in disbelief. It was unsettling and delightful all at once. Over the next hours, Mara learned a little of the girl's world, though the details were cryptic at best. Names, titles, and histories flowed between broken phrases, gestures, and repeated attempts at speech. She seemed important, not in the ordinary sense, but as though her very existence carried weight Mara couldn't yet measure. Mara slept little, keeping a watchful eye on her unexpected companion. When she awoke, the girl had grown. taller, stronger, more assured in her posture. She studied Mara with eyes that seemed to hold entire galaxies inside them, and for a moment Mara felt utterly small. "Who are you?" she finally asked, letting the words roll from her lips in careful arrangement. The girl's translator kicked in. "I am Leora," she said, voice halting, deliberate, "and you saved me." Mara's fingers flexed around the console. "That's it?" she asked, still catching her breath. "That's all it takes?" Leora's gaze was unshakable. "All it ever took," she replied. From somewhere beyond the viewport, the stars stretched into endless lines, the galaxy humming around them. Mara realized then that the station had not been abandoned. It had been waiting for someone to act when the outcome didn't matter to them. And in that moment of action, the entire universe could change. The next day, Mara adjusted course toward the nearest inhabited system. Leora followed, quiet and observant, absorbing every detail. Her questions were sharp, direct, and unsettlingly insightful. Mara answered cautiously, sharing what she could about humans, about planets, about the small absurdities of life in a vast galaxy. "You learn quickly," Mara said after a long silence. "You saved me," Leora replied. "I must learn everything." Mara nodded slowly. She had seen children survive impossible odds, but Leora was not a child in the ordinary sense. There was something old in her eyes, a memory that had been passed down like a secret through generations. Mara's instincts screamed that the girl's importance stretched far beyond her own survival. It didn't take long for the first signal to appear. Ships, long-range transmissions, signatures from beyond the borders of the explored systems. Something was looking for Leora. Mara's stomach tightened. Whoever it was, they would not tolerate her absence. "Hide," Mara said, adjusting the ship's trajectory. "We can't make contact, not yet." Leora's expression was calm, composed, almost eerily so. "They will come," she said simply, "but we will meet them on our terms." The days passed in tension, marked by scans, course corrections, and quiet lessons. Leora learned to speak, to navigate the ship, to anticipate Mara's movements. Mara taught her humor, small tricks, and human ways of survival. In return, Leora revealed things Mara could not yet name: intuition, awareness, and strategy that seemed centuries old despite her young form. One night, as they floated through a cluster of dying stars, Mara asked the question she had been avoiding. "If I hadn't found you, if I hadn't fed you, what would have happened?" "You would have done the same," Leora said without hesitation, "but the universe would have lost a future it needed." Mara laughed softly, shaking her head. "I didn't set out to change anything," she said. "You did," Leora replied, "just by being human." By the time they reached the next inhabited system, Mara knew that their journey was only beginning. Signals of pursuit grew stronger, voices in the void whispering threats and demands. Mara felt the weight of choice settle on her shoulders. She had saved a life, yes, but she had also awakened forces she could not yet name. And Leora, sitting quietly at the co-pilot seat, watched her with steady eyes, waiting for the right moment to teach Mara the true meaning of consequence, mercy, and power. The galaxy was about to remember that a single human act could ripple farther than any weapon, farther than any fleet, and far beyond the reach of fear. Mara exhaled, gripping the console tightly. She had no idea what came next, but for the first time in years, she felt ready to face it. The stars outside shimmered like fireflies in dark water, and somewhere deep in the void, a lost empire stirred, sensing the return of its last ember. The sensors blared before Mara had fully processed the readings. Multiple vessels, sleek and angular, were approaching at high speed. They were unmarked, but the signatures were unmistakable, military-grade, disciplined, precise. Whoever they were looking for Leora. Mara's jaw tightened. There was no hesitation in the universe's law. Anyone hunting a life like hers would stop at nothing. "Ready?" Mara asked, her voice steady despite the tension coiling inside her. Leora tilted her head, eyes reflecting the starfield. "Always," she said, and her voice carried the weight of certainty, even though she had only existed for a few days in Mara's world. The first vessel decloaked silently, emerging from a nebula like a shadow. Mara maneuvered the ship, weaving through the debris of forgotten satellites and asteroid fragments, while Leora observed the approaching ships with unnerving calm. She pointed to the control panel, and the ship's AI instantly executed maneuvers Mara hadn't even imagined. "They listen to you," Mara said, surprise edging her tone. "They must," Leora replied. "Every ship carries memory if you know how to ask." The pursuers fired, energy beams cutting through the void. Mara twisted the ship, narrowly avoiding impact, but a graze tore a streak across the hull. The vessel groaned, systems flashing warnings. "You're not just learning," Mara muttered, gripping the console. "You're rewriting the rules." Leora's fingers hovered over controls she didn't fully need to touch, and yet the ship responded as if her intentions were commands. Shields shifted, thrusters adjusted, and sensors fed back information that Mara could barely comprehend. The attackers hesitated, confused by the ship's erratic but precise movements. "They're unprepared for polite strategy," Mara said. Her voice held disbelief. "Politeness can be lethal," Leora replied. Within minutes, the attacking vessels were immobilized, not destroyed but trapped, caught in the gravitational and magnetic currents the ship now controlled effortlessly. Mara's breath caught. She had faced pirates, mercenaries, and smugglers, but this was beyond anything she had imagined. "They won't attack again," Mara said cautiously. "At least not without thinking twice." Leora leaned back in her seat, calm and poised. "They will send others, always others." And they did. Over the next several light days, fleets arrived from different sectors, each believing themselves prepared for conflict. Each time, Leora and Mara's ship responded with strategy, not violence. They disrupted weapon systems, rerouted communication arrays, and offered assistance to those in need, even when they didn't ask for it. Mara watched in awe as the galaxy slowly bent to their actions. "Why do you spare them?" Mara asked one quiet evening as they floated through a field of luminous gas clouds. "Because mercy binds stronger than fear," Leora said simply. "Fear lasts days, memory lasts centuries." Mara shook her head. "You're changing everything. You're impossible." "I am what I must be," Leora said. Her eyes, large and intense, met Mara's. "And you are what I needed." It was a bond neither fully understood, a connection formed by life saved and choices made. Mara realized that she had not simply rescued Leora, she had become part of a story far larger than herself, and the universe was taking note. Their journey brought them to the edge of known space, where the remnants of an ancient empire lingered among derelict stations and quiet planets. Signals pulsed from long-abandoned worlds, carrying the faint memory of civilizations that had once ruled by power alone. Leora's gaze sharpened. "This is where I begin," she said, determination resonating in her tone. "Where I reclaim what was lost, not with conquest but with life." Mara nodded, though unease pressed against her ribs. "And they will resist. Empires do not vanish quietly." "They will follow the rules of memory," Leora replied. "I intend to teach them mercy first and then power." The first encounter was with a border coalition, expecting aggression, expecting battle. Instead, Leora's transmission arrived, a proposal for negotiation, supplies, and assistance in rebuilding. The leaders of the coalition paused, confused by the absence of hostility. Mara could see the calculations running across their screens, the hesitation, the doubt, the silent fear of a strategy they did not understand. "Politeness," Mara muttered, "it works too well." "Yes," Leora said, eyes bright, "it always has." Over the weeks, fleets that had once considered war now awaited her instructions, watching as she directed aid and reconstruction with precision and calm. Mara learned that power, when combined with memory and mercy, could reshape the galaxy without a single laser fired. Yet not all welcomed this new approach. Dissident factions gathered, angry that the old ways were being undermined. They sent messages, threats laced with ceremony and challenge. Mara and Leora watched quietly, analyzing. When the first attack arrived, Leora responded with perfect calm, evacuating civilians before a single shot landed, jamming weapon systems and isolating command ships without harming a soul. Mara, sitting beside her as the young woman orchestrated every move, could only watch in awe. "You've rewritten the rules of war," she whispered. "Not war," Leora corrected. "Survival life." As the galaxy slowly adjusted, Mara noticed subtle changes everywhere. Trade routes reopened, patrols shifted to observation, and aid fleets became permanent fixtures. The old notion of power through fear faltered, replaced by influence through memory and mercy. Mara felt a strange satisfaction, even as she realized the weight of what they had achieved. "You taught me humans," Leora said one quiet night, watching the stars stretch beyond the viewport. "You taught me choice, laughter, patience. That is why this works." Mara smiled, rubbing the back of her neck. "I didn't know what I was teaching. I was just being human." "Then you were perfect," Leora replied. Months passed, and the galaxy adjusted around the new ruler. Leora's empire did not grow through conquest or intimidation, but through acts of kindness, understanding, and the careful enforcement of justice that remembered life's value above all. Mara remained at her side, a constant reference point, a reminder of what had begun this transformation. Even old enemies began to respect the new order. Rivals were invited to negotiate, not surrender. Borders were redrawn with fairness, and disputes settled with dialogue first, force second. Mara watched the council meetings, amazed at how Leora listened, observed, and spoke, guiding decisions with wisdom far beyond her years. "Strength," Mara said quietly during one meeting, "doesn't have to mean fear." Leora looked at him, eyes serious, considering. "No, strength is choice. It is what you do when the easy path is destruction." He nodded, thinking of the station where he had found her, of the simple act of feeding a child that had grown into a galaxy-changing chain of events. The final challenge came quietly. A coalition of dissidents, unwilling to abandon their old ways, converged on a resource-rich system at the edge of the sector. Mara and Leora arrived, the coalition expecting a violent showdown. Leora paused, then extended a hand in peace. She offered aid, protection, and guidance for rebuilding, even as the fleet bristled with weapons. Mara held his breath. Hours passed. Communication channels were filled with suspicion and negotiation. Slowly, the leaders relented. They had expected war, but they found something unfamiliar: patience, strategy, and the inescapable logic of mercy. When it was over, Mara looked at her. "You didn't fire a single shot." Leora smiled softly. "No, violence is easy. Change requires patience." They traveled back to their capital station, where Leora's people awaited her return. Armor clattered softly as soldiers lined the docking bay. Mara followed behind, hands awkwardly clasped, as Leora walked forward, posture confident, eyes steady. The people knelt, not out of fear but in recognition. Mara realized then that he had saved not just a life, but a future. Days later in the ship's gardens, Leora spoke again of the imprinting law, the tradition that bound rulers to those who had preserved life. "I choose to keep you," she said softly, "not as a chain, but as a guide, as a memory of what must not be forgotten." Mara nodded, feeling the weight and honor of the bond. "I didn't plan for any of this," he said. "You never do," Leora replied, "but sometimes the universe chooses for you." Years passed and Mara remained by Leora's side. He learned when to speak, when to remain silent, and when to trust that her judgment, formed through both human and alien experience, was absolute. Leora ruled not with terror or displays of might, but with understanding, memory, and the wisdom of survival. The galaxy, once poised on the brink of endless cycles of fear and war, now moved with subtle harmony. Trade resumed, borders stabilized, and life thrived. Mara, the human who had once scavenged stations for survival, now walked through gardens beneath bioluminescent leaves, watching a galaxy learn that power could be anchored to kindness. One night, as stars burned softly in distant space, Mara asked, "Do you ever think about the station?" Leora smiled, recalling the cold metal, the tiny ration, the moment life had chosen to continue. "Every day," she said. "It was the beginning." Mara laughed, leaning back. "I just fed a kid. I didn't know I'd change everything." "You did," Leora said softly. "You were human, that was enough." The stars outside shimmered like fire caught in still water. Mara realized then that heroism was not about glory or conquest, but about the small, human acts that ripple through the universe, shaping futures in ways no one could predict. And in the quiet glow of the living ship, the empire that remembered mercy thrived, anchored not by fear, but by memory, choice, and the courage of a single human who dared to feed a child. The galaxy, for once, was learning to hope. The end.